Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the Essential Credentials, episode 71, first episode of 2023. Really excited to be back. We're going through different things. One of us is sick. That would be me. One of us is always got something going on behind the scenes. So I'm glad you're able to make it, Alan. Alan, are you excited to be here for the first epi of the year?
Yeah, absolutely. It's not for a lack of wanting or trying to get on these episodes. When I don't make it, it is because something, very, very important has come up, and
Mhm.
I have to put it ahead of this. But otherwise, I always enjoy coming on with you, coming on with Greg, hanging out. So I'm glad to be here.
Hopefully, we can manifest Greg. I know that he's probably going to be here soon.
I have a
Um,
feeling he might be able to make it at sometime in the next few
yeah,
seconds. I don't know
yeah,
why.
because I'm stepping in temporarily in the hosting role here. Um, but hopefully, Greg will be here soon. Nice to see everybody here. Yeah, it's hey,
Oh, hey,
there he is.
what's going
Hey,
on?
what's going on, guys?
Oh
Not
man,
much.
I had the background all prepped for you too, man. Darn it, I got to fix it. There it is. There we go.
Oh, thank you.
So I'm gonna pass it off to you, Greg. How you doing, man?
I'm doing well. How are you guys?
Happy to
Doing
be.
well. Matt said that he's sick, and I missed at least an episode, if not an episode and a half. So, to the extent that I wasn't here for a couple, I'm glad to be back. Hopefully, here for every episode that we do together in 2023, because
Yeah.
we always have a lot to talk about. We have been talking a lot about a lot of stuff in the background, so maybe some of that can come up today.
Okay. Sounds good.
Yeah, it feels
Um,
like one of us has to be sick when we do these. And for like 3 months ago and on, you've been sick, I've been sick, Alan's been sick, you've been sick, I've been sick. It's just we're just passing it around, dude.
yeah.
Craziness.
It's been crazy. It's been a wild ride. So hopefully everybody can get better soon, but I understand it's been difficult for everybody. So I appreciate you guys being here so we could do this.
Definitely, dude. Definitely. Yeah, I was just we were kind of chatting behind the scenes. Alan was trying to find his mat that he had made, and
Yeah,
and it's definitely an art trying to get like something visually pleasing underneath the camera. If you're going to go this way, I think you and I have talked about having like the camera at us and our nice background or whatever. But I wonder how many people like really put time into that. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
have everything perfect behind them. You see a lot of YouTubers do that. You know, they got lighting and stuff. But yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, I think I don't know. My background has what it has, and I think it is something that people focus on. So I'm sure it is a thing. I would imagine a lot of people have the backgrounds and focus on making it a thing for them.
I love personally, I have no background, never have, but I always enjoy a good background. It's always, like it's especially if a person is just talking. Sometimes you can just look behind them and see what it is, and it's almost always something that people took time to put together, and you can sort of pick out little details like over both of you guys' shoulders is a lot about what you guys are about right now in terms of collecting, in terms of what we talk about off camera when we hang out. So like I'd like to um, spruce up my set a little bit. I did get a playing mat in because I was so disappointed by the Bonds mat that I tried to create on Etsy, because Matt and I had been talking about making a custom mat for my channel, or at least the handle for my old channel, and we're going to get around to that. But I tried to do it myself on Etsy a couple of weeks ago, and it did not turn out well. I can't find it right now, but I did get a playing mat
Oh,
for
nice.
Magic, which is actually something that Ultra Pro released for my favorite card
Oh,
from
cool.
from the set that I'm breaking and collecting right now, which I think I showed you guys last time. So I like that. I'm gonna enjoy this mat. The other one, I would say, leave it to the professionals. Don't try to do it yourself.
So what happened?
I took a picture of one of my favorite cards, the 97 Mirror Gold Team
Yeah.
out of 25 with the peel on it. And I bought a camera because I had a baby recently, and we wanted to get an expensive camera to take all these GQ pictures, except she's a girl. So, and also we never figured out how to use the camera. And it's so precise that it focuses like on a pixel if you wanted to, and doesn't focus on the rest of the picture. So part of the card is super in focus, and then the rest of it is blurred because it's tilted. And so just that centimeter of difference closer to the camera makes it blurry. It's a cool effect on like your phone, but when you try to print it on a grainy play mat, it turns out terribly. And also I cropped it wrong, so like the top and the bottom of the card are sort of chopped off. It looks worse than amateur. I'm not sure. I'll probably show it on one video where I'm cracking open some Bonds cards out of a packet, but we got to try again, I think.
So what did you do differently from the Bonds to this Magic card?
This one is just ordered from the Ultra Pro website. These are made to order. They're limited. So I went to, they call it the LGS, the local gaming shop or store. So I went to the LGS to see if they had it because I want to support local. They didn't have it. It's limited edition. So I went on the Ultra Pro and they had like 7 left. So I got it. And then they're never to be remade again. So that's it.
So is that just for you, or does that fit everybody? Is that big enough for everybody, or is it just your side of the play cards?
No. That's a great question. It's really a play mat just for you. It's the size of those mats where you see when guys break cards on a mat right in front of you, and you can see the outer sort of edges of the mat. That's like maybe 3 feet, 2 feet across.
Okay.
There are 6-foot mats that roll across like a massive table, so you can't see the contours of it. But it's for playing. You should be able to play your entire Magic sort of setup on just that mat, or open Bonds cards.
Yeah. Okay. So just for you then.
Yep.
Greg, didn't they have like, I don't know if you remember this when you were in school, but there was like a Dungeons and Dragons group, and I'm pretty sure other card games and stuff. Like, don't they make mats where you like they have the spots set for where the cards go? These massive ones. I think I've seen those before too. You know what I mean? Where like you have the outlines for where all the cards go.
Yeah. So I know there have been some like starter mats, I guess. I don't know that they have. I'm sure they do, but I haven't seen any in a long time. So it's been quite a while since I've seen anything like that. But I know they have the starter mats for all those card games where you can kind of see where to put stuff. So I know I do know that exists. It's been a long time since I've seen anything like that.
Yeah, Greg, if you created a mat, what do you think you would put on there? Your first one.
So for like a collectible card game?
No, for all of your collectibles, since we're talking about all of them these days.
Like if you were YouTubing, like you're recording videos facing down with a mat. Yeah, that's what I'm wondering too.
Man, that's a hard question because I've got, that Tim Salmon box. I've got a Barry Sanders box. I don't know if I would split all my favorite players up and do like a 4-on-1 mat, or if I would do a 1-on-1 mat. That would be something I'd think about. I'd have a hard time. I think I might do like a Tim Salmon, Frank Thomas mat, and then a Larry Bird, Barry Sanders mat, and mix them up between the two. I think that's what I would end up doing. I don't know that 4 people on one mat would be. I think it'd be too much.
Too loud.
I think I'd probably do two on each, and then split it up and switch them out.
Right.
I mean, the dimensions are really specific, so I just didn't have the time to put together. Like, I was thinking about a collage of my favorite cards, but do you really, when you look down at it, at one of my videos, do you really want to see like 14 gigantic cards all on one mat? I feel like that's probably too much. Usually simpler is better.
Well, so yeah, if you're putting cards on a mat, you don't want it to be too design centric, because then it's hard to see the card, right? So if you have just like a crazy background, the card is going to kind of blend in on the background. You're not going to see the edges of the card. it's just all gonna kind of be too much. So it's one of those situations where you want to have something cool, but you don't want to take away from the cards.
Yeah, it's actually quite fun when you get down to learning how to do it. You have to, find images and remove the background so the player picture is kind of floating, and it's really hard. I've made a couple flurry ones that I've never had made, like printed, like my one that I made for, I think 2 years ago. I made it for hockey stuff, and it's a lot of work. I mean, Alan, when you and I tried to make one, it's just to get it perfect. There's so many options. It's almost like you have to know exactly what you want. And if you don't, it takes a lot. You spend a lot of time, like, creating our YouTube banner that took me like 3 hours because we were, sharing back and forth, and there's just so many little adjustments. So it's a good thing Alan was there for spell check. Thanks, dude.
Well, to Matt's credit, we did talk about that custom made Bonds, Matt, and we spent like 3 hours where I sent you about 400 Bonds photographs and about 30 different fonts. And, like you really sat through about 3 hours, but that was we kind of had to drop it there because we got too ambitious. And I just got to do one that's nice and that I could, that I can do for my part of this channel. That'd be great. So looking forward to that.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. For sure. It is fun when you finally get it. You know what I mean? It's just like creating anything, like Greg designing his background when he finally got it like perfect, after all the time you spend, it's worth it, hopefully.
Yeah. When you want something like that, you tend to put a lot of energy and time into something. And so I get it when you want to have a cool mat to break from or play off of, because you want to show it off and have something cool on camera. So I get it.
Yeah. So what's I don't know, this is kind of an interesting journey that we're seeing, Greg, because Alan, when we first met him, it was Bonds 100%. And now, as 2023 is approached and you and your son are playing Magic, it seems like you're kind of really dedicating yourself to chasing those down. Like, we talk a little bit in the chat and whatnot, but I'm curious for everybody else to know, me and Greg, like, what's the biggest difference, man? Is it just as much fun?
Between Magic and Bonds, it's really different. I think it would be a better comparison if I were super passionate about both. But right now, I just can't find that spark for Bonds. I would say since I started collecting Barry Bonds cards in 2018, this is probably the lowest ebb or flow that I've had in terms of my interest in Bonds cards. Like that stack of cards that I said I didn't have time to open. At this point, I'm sure I've had time to open it. I just haven't opened it. And that's just because I have a lack of desire to do it. And I don't really know why that is. It could be because every time I do have time, it's like the last 2 hours of the week. You know what I mean? I had no time to do anything else.
Yeah.
So you're tired and you're just like, should I like switch off this random Netflix marathon? Or should I should I get everything ready, dust off the scanner, set up the external hard drive, get out all the supply, it's just like, forget it. I'm just gonna watch Netflix. So I think that's part of it. And the other part is that my kids don't care about Barry Bonds, so, but they do like Pokemon. They do like Magic in particular. That's a way to bond. And it's something we can do together. And you don't just look at your cards, you get to literally play with them. So there's a dual purpose. And so is it as fun? I don't know. I don't think so. I think I'm chasing a high. I've been opening a lot of boxes that are expensive, and I complained to both of you guys about how expensive it is and how I know that it's the opposite of buying a Barry Bonds card. When you buy a Barry Bonds card, you're like, okay, this is probably not going to fall off a cliff. But when you buy modern anything, when you buy any set of any collectible that was released in the last year, you can be sure that the card is going to be worth a fraction of what you paid for it out of the box or as a single in the subsequent years, for the most part. So I know that in the back of my mind, this is like this weird situation where there cannot be any investment aspect to me, and that's part of my DNA. So that part's missing, but the other part is that I get to play it, and so it's a double-edged sword. I can't really say I haven't been doing this long enough to know how it compares to Bonds, which I was obsessed about for so long until probably the last couple of months.
So are you opening Magic cards and boxes on camera, or are you doing that off camera with your family?
I'm doing them on camera. I'm meant to post those videos, but they
Mhm.
take a little bit of time. There's not a lot of video editing that goes on in my videos,
Yeah.
but I do like to put like a beginning track in there. I don't even if it's necessary. Like if it's an interesting box break, it should stand on its own.
Yeah.
So I think did I show you guys the binder last time that I've been putting my my magic cards into?
Yeah, it was like a
Um,
preview in the last video that you did, right? It was like a
Okay.
quickly.
So
you
it
went
was a
through
really quick flip through, but all of us collectors are OCD. So when you have missing pockets, I mean, I feel like I'm willing to pay hundreds or thousands of dollars to get these pockets filled. I mean, I could just go on eBay and buy the entire foil set for like $300, but a box is like 200 to 250,
Wow.
and each one will only get you just a few more in your pocket. And sorry guys to take up so much time, but just one more thing here. While I'm on the issue of putting stuff into binders, I did take the time to put my lower end ultra cards together.
Nice.
I really like these binders. They're designed for trading card games like Magic and Pokemon, where
Yeah.
the back is uniform and there's like no stats or like anything to read.
Uh-huh.
So you don't get to read the backs of these cards. You have to take them out in order to see the back,
yeah.
which is inferior. But I hate dust, and this thing zips up and it's high quality and it's side loading, so it doesn't slip out. And you could put it in a premium soft sleeve within, so you don't damage the card sliding it in or out. And it's been really cool, sort of taking stock of everything that I've got and everything that I still need to get.
Yeah.
Like the 96 Home Run Kings, the one that I love so much, the Redeemed and the Redemption.
Yeah.
I'm considering putting a $200 card in here just so that I don't have as many empty spaces. So I'm missing most of the platinum medallions, but I didn't leave spots for them in here because they're never coming out of whatever hard case I have them in.
So you've got it all sorted out to where every card needs to be in a certain spot minus the platinum medallions.
That's right, exactly right. So I got the master set going of that, and the next set to do is collector's choice. There is something really satisfying about filling out binder pages.
Yeah, definitely.
I've enjoyed it for the rainbow stuff. I know that you guys don't do this with modern, but for me, it's fun to see them. You don't need to read the back of the same card over and over again. So these have been perfect for putting glass knot rainbows together. Because they're cheap, first of all, but they look good in the whole page is filled up. But I have to say, Alan, the 12 pager is the one that I need to get because there's some rainbows that are like 15 or 12, and then you have like a whole 9-page, and then like 2 random ones that aren't really there with it. So
yeah,
that's next. I need to get a 12-pager. Those books are really nice.
Yeah.
Well, that's funny you asked this. It's funny you asked this. I collect Ichiro because I'm in that quandary right now. So one of these boxes, these are like the high end sort of collector investor boxes that everybody who plays the game kind of like isn't into. They look at people who buy these boxes, it's kind of like, you're not a real Magic fan. You don't really want to play the game. You want the fancy foil ones. We just want any version of the card because they all say the same thing and they all do the same thing in the game. And so these are for people who want their cards to look pretty, like me, or who are ballers who do play, but they want to bedazzle or soup up every single one of the cards into like the shiny, more expensive, rarer version. So you can buy draft, which is what I've been doing with my kid. You can do set, which is that sort of middling thing where you supplement your deck and your collection with cards, and then you can do the most expensive sort of booster thing. And these things are anywhere from 200, like I said, to $250 a piece. And when I open these 8 packs, I'm only going to fill out a few more cards in the binder. So it's not a very good financial proposition, but I did just order a sealed case of 6 of these because it makes it a lower per box price. And I'm wondering, should I keep it sealed? Should I open it? Like I have no chill. These boxes, they contain the Transformers that initially attracted me to this particular release. And in that, they have these shattered glass Transformers. They look like this, but they're foil, and they're like 1 per case or less. And there's 15 different Transformers in the set, so it's 1 out of 15 cases to pull an Optimus Prime, one
Wow.
at best, or a Megatron. But then, of course, I had no chill, so I went on eBay and I bought an Optimus for like hella money, like way more than I should have. And in like 4 days, it already dropped like $125. So that tells you I have no idea what I'm doing. I know I have no idea what I'm doing, and I have to consider keeping some of these cases or boxes that I want to break sealed because I'm going to go broke opening
Yeah.
these maps at this rate.
Well, I just wonder, for something like that, what is holding it onto equal? Does it equal more money later on, or does it equal some like lesser money because nobody wants? I don't know. I don't know about Magic enough to know what a sealed box equals.
This is the equivalent. Well, right. I mean, opening a box is obvious to everybody. It's almost never a good financial decision to open a box of cards. It's always just for fun. The fun is the endorphins rush that you get and the satisfaction that you get from actually pulling those cards yourself and putting them in binders if that's what you want to do with them. But in terms of keeping it sealed, I don't know. Like if you keep some of the legendary sets from 1993 sealed, you'd be a millionaire right now. But I don't know if it's a good idea to keep Topps Chrome 2023 sealed
Right.
for 15 years. Who knows what the hell's going to happen in 15 years, And then what are you going to do with that? Like, I'm just going to sit there with a box of cards, just collecting dust, hoping that I make $14 per annum, over the next 10 years. It's pretty ridiculous. But at the same time, when your Optimus Prime loses $125 in value, in sort of real market value in 4 days, you're just like, oops, maybe I should have waited 4 days. What happens if I wait 4 days longer?
Yeah.
Right.
Well, that's just what you talked about, Greg, like with the Jefferson stuff, like just keep waiting, don't jump the gun and buy the first or second one that comes up. And that's been really strange to watch because there's these, case hits, but I'm seeing like 5 to 10 a week. And these people are still paying crazy amounts. I'm like, shouldn't they be coming down? Like there's way more than y'all are paying. Like the money would indicate there's not very many, but they're, like the Kaboons, for instance, those things are just ridiculous because there's so many of them, but people pay ridiculous amounts. So I'm wondering, is it the same though with like Optimus Prime? There's a lot more than people, realize, and they just want to be the first ones to have it, or what?
There's a huge component of that, and also the more I learn, the more I know. But I mean, like I think Magic, Wizards of the Coast, the makers of Magic, who are owned by Hasbro, that huge toy company, sometimes do multiple printings. So it could be like the Ken Griffey Jr. 1989 Upper Deck situation, where if the Transformers do actually blow up, which is unlikely because most Magic players hate the fact that there's Transformers in this set. But if they do somehow magically happen to blow up, they could print it a second, a third, a fourth printing. So nobody actually knows how much before they turn the spigot off. So that's another aspect.
That's weird. I mean, I don't even, you imagine that, Greg, if we were like opening stuff nowadays, if we didn't know how many, Luis Robert rookie autos there was, to just keep putting them out. Like it would.
Well, I don't know. Theoretically, they would make there a noticeable difference between the prints because in comic books, when you look at the barcode of a comic, it should theoretically tell you what print it is. And, hopefully, books do the same kind of way. When you look at the copyright page and it tells you third printing, fourth printing. So hopefully if they were to do that, they would tell you, hey, this is Optimus Prime, second printing, third printing, versus just a mass printing of a bunch of cards where you couldn't tell the difference. And maybe they do it in a different like foil or a different hologram or something that lets you know which one is which, because a lot of times they'll do that and they'll have like gold hologram and silver hologram and bronze hologram, and then that way you know which one is the different kind of printing. So hopefully they would do that rather than convoluting all of the prints by just making the same card for 4 printings.
Yeah, you've been giving me a little bit of a crash course in comic books. I mean, apparently the barcode matters because it depends on how the books are distributed, right? Some of them are sent through the mail, and then there's that little sticker that can't be removed that's like put right on there. And then there's some that go direct to the shop, the comic book shop. And then there are some that are sent to like newsstands to stand in those like wire racks, right?
Yeah.
That are and that get messed up. And so the ones that are sent to the newsstands are by far the most valuable, right? Of the
Yeah. So in history, traditionally, newsstand copies aren't as well kept as the collector edition store copies, because newsstand copies, you go to the airport and you're buying a comic book, you go to Kroger and you're buying a comic book. Those are not the collector's editions and the store editions. And the barcode on a comic book should theoretically tell you if it's issue 1 in the actual comic, like the first print cover, and what printing it is. So let's say you bought Spider-Man #1 and it's a variant and it's issue 1, first print. So it'd be like 0121 because it's a variant. So it'd be number 2 instead of 0111. So if you look at the barcode, it would tell you what it is. So you'd know, okay, this is a variant because it's 0121, or if it's not a variant, 0111, or if it's a second print, 0112, that means it's the second print. So there's a lot to see off the barcodes. Those are not just random numbers. You can tell a lot off a barcode from a comic book, and it's helpful because it really lets you know what kind of comic you're dealing with and what copy, what print, and cards don't have that. So if 1989 Upper Deck's printing 4 copies of Griffey rookies, you can't tell, is this the first print, the 4th print, the 10th print? So it would be nice to know that kind of thing if Magic was doing the same thing. But the only way to do that with cards is either do a copyright year or have different color, holographs or foils, or there has to be some way to differentiate.
I have a question about comics, actually. You mentioned the newsstand prints, Greg, and they're usually in worse condition, right?
Yeah.
Well, you think relating it to cards, you think about collector's choice, and most of those would never grade well, right? Let alone finding a copy of said card that used to not exist. You talk about grading comics too. If you find a really high graded newsstand copy of a rare comic, would that increase value?
Yeah.
Or are people still not like, oh, it's a newsstand copy, don't care?
Yeah. So the newsstand copies usually have the barcode, like you can scan it at Kroger,
Mm-hmm.
And so when you look for comics, you could tell if it's the newsstand because it will have the barcode. And the collector's edition, the comic store editions will usually either have a line through the barcode, or it'll be like a picture of Spider-Man or something instead of a barcode.
Okay.
And so when you look at those, you can usually tell, oh, I see a picture of Spider-Man where the barcode is. So that lets me know it's not a newsstand edition. Or there's a line through the whole barcode, so it's not a newsstand edition because it lets you know you can't scan it. So those usually go for a little bit more. It could be, 5% more or 100% more. But newsstand copies traditionally, if you look for a 1985, X-Men, and you went for the newsstand edition versus the collector's edition, you'd end up paying more for the newsstand edition.
Okay. Well, and I think what's interesting, I don't know about you, Alan, just thinking about this, the consistency with the barcode. I mean, has that been going on like 50 years ago they were doing it? Like, because it's really nice to be able to have that consistency with all your different variations. Whereas the only way to tell now, like with Topps, right, is the super short prints have a different series, like the numbers a little bit different, but people find them within 2 to 3 days of breaking cases, but I don't know. I think it's pretty cool that there's been that consistency for how long has it been going on, Greg?
Oh yeah. We're looking at this point, 40 years plus of newsstand editions. So It's been pretty pretty easy for comic collectors to know. And then you have, the Canadian, and then you have the European editions, and you can tell because when you look at the prices on the comic, it'll be in euros or Canadian dollar, whatever it is. You can tell the difference. So that is considered a variant for comics. So if I see it in $1, or if I see it in $2 Canadian, they consider it the Canadian variant, and then that usually sells more than the US one. So there's just multiple ways of creating variants, or whether it's intended or not. I think at that point in 1979, they weren't trying to create variants. I think they were just selling comics in Canada, in Mexico, in Europe, and that was just it. Like, let's sell more comics. I don't think they were creating variants. But nowadays, people consider them variants because they're not in US dollars.
Well, collectors are going to do anything to come up with some kind of variant or rarer copy, right? We're good at that.
Yeah. And it used to be happenstance, right? It used to be, that looks different because it was printed in another country for another country, But now you got manufacturer rarity, the way they had in 90s inserts, where they purposefully create very rare, sometimes stealth set of variations to the main comic book. It's such a deep hobby, fascinating, but before you buy anything expensive in any new lane, as Junior was saying, you should probably study that industry for a year or so. Otherwise, you're going to do exactly what I thought I was probably doing anyway, which was making a dumb money purchase, but doing it because I was caught in the moment and I really wanted the card.
Yeah.
Just, how many hundreds of thousands of dollars of cases am I have to open to find that Optimus? I could just go and buy it right now for a mid-range Barry Bonds 90s insert. So why don't I just go ahead and pull the trigger? And meanwhile, everybody else on eBay is looking at me like, are you crazy? He's just way overpaid for that. A whole bunch of people put more cards on eBay after that because they're like, okay, there's some dude here buying this stuff. So
swaying the market.
Yeah.
Yeah. You get the goggles, you get the youth vision goggles where you're just, I want to buy something fun and I want to get this cool card, but you don't necessarily know the specifics behind it. So I think that's probably, what happens to a lot of people. If you're not familiar with what you're doing, you just get caught up in it. And then over time, you just start to learn what you're looking for, what exists. And then you gain the knowledge just by putting the time in. So I agree with you. Putting a year in is not going to hurt you. It's only going to help you understand the market of what you're getting into because you've put so much time into it. And with comics, like I was saying, it wasn't an intended thing. I can't speak for print runs on any comics, but I know anything that's not in US dollars tends to be more rare because the US stuff, it just seems like more collector friendly. People in the United States seem to have become interested in collecting stuff and holding on to it, especially 80s, 90s. We all thought we were going to be millionaires with the death of Superman. And so I think most US collectors have put stuff in bags and kept it safe, where people in Canada and Mexico and Europe have just kind of thrown it to the side thinking like, I got a reader copy. And so those things have kind of become more rare. And so like you guys were saying, collectors find a way to create rarity. You look at all like the 90s Donruss and Fleer and all that, and you're looking at the different barcodes on the back, and this one has an asterisk and this one doesn't have it, and this one says it was printed in 89 and this one says it was printed in 90, and this one is missing the stat and this one has the dot. and
keep going
hologram, right?
Yeah.
Just a regular silver hologram.
Right. And so people create their I need all of them. I need the one with the dot and without the dot, and this one has a 3 and this one has half of a 3. So it gets way out of hand. But collectors find a way when they get bored or when they have everything to create rarity. And I think comics are no different than that.
I got a question for both of you guys. Comparing comics for Greg, comparing comics to all the sports cards that you get, Alan, Magic to the Bond stuff. Which one do you think has a steeper learning curve for you guys, or had a steeper learning curve? Because Greg, you mentioned comics. You kind of went back and forth from comics to cards. Alan, you basically hockey, now Bonds, now Magic. Like which one, if you were getting into it, would have the steeper learning curve? Because all that stuff Greg said, I had no clue that even in. And if you didn't know that, you didn't talk to somebody that knew that, you'd have to go find it yourself, just like we did with 90s inserts. So which one has a steeper learning curve, you think? No easy questions tonight, man.
Well, I'll go first. Greg mentioned how there are variants, and I'm learning everything more every day, obviously, about Magic. But one of the things that really made the Magic community mad was that Hasbro printed a 30th anniversary edition. Actually, it was like 30 years ago when it came out, 29 years ago when I first picked up the game and really did more collecting than playing, but a little bit of playing. And they ended up reprinting some of the the Honus Wagners and the 52 Mantles. And they made it clear that it was a reprint, but they didn't change the borders enough to make it super, super, super duper obvious, so to a really brand new person, they honestly would have no idea what they're looking at. It's obvious to any novice even that it's a reprint, but not to brand new people. So if you get a big money brand new person coming, they may confuse the actual $5 million Honus Wagner with a $10,000 reprint that shouldn't be $10,000. It should only be $500. So Magic promised that they would never reprint a certain set of cards, and they did that. And not only did they do that, they sold it direct from themselves. They didn't go through LGSs. They didn't go through distributors. They wanted all the cash for them. And each pack was $1,000.
Wow.
So that's like a money grab, and that turned a lot of people off. It would turn anyone off in any industry. 90s inserts, doesn't matter, any sport, comics. Yeah. If Marvel pulled that would not go over well with collectors at all. But the point is there are all sorts of variants, and Magic has this problem that the good cards, they can just reprint and put a new picture on it and reprint again and put foil on it, and then expanded art past the borders and foil, and then full art all the way full bleed, and which is what's happening right now in foil. So there's 10 variants now, just like there was in the 90s, of every card, and they get reprinted worse because they're the same cards that you can play over and over, just in different years. Yeah. So that keeps diluting the price for collectors of cards. And Wall Street said that Hasbro's only money-making division, Wizards of the Coast, is basically trashing the only cash cow they have by overprinting everything. So Wall Street said that.
Yeah, I would say just initial instincts, like Magic or any collectible card game of that nature, would be more convoluted or difficult to differentiate than a comic book, because comic books, they have printing dates on them, or they have the barcode that kind of lets you know what you're looking at, versus a card, which theoretically a reprint might be exactly the same with a slightly different border. Mm-hmm. So I think in that terms, a collectible card game like Magic or something, if it were reprinted, it would be harder to differentiate between the two than it would a comic book, because even with comic books, sometimes they'll have multiple printings, but they'll do different background colors. There'll be a blue and a red and a green, but even then the barcode kind of tells you what you're looking at, and they kind of held that standard for a while. The barcode is the ultimate way to know what you're looking at. So I think Magic or card games in general might be harder for the average collector than comics.
Well, and how often do you guys in your comics and Magic have those moments? Remember we did with 90s where it was oh, there's that proof that nobody even knew existed until last month, and oh my gosh, Salmon has one, Bonds has one. You have those moments of discovery still. I felt like we had those for years when we were collecting 90s. Seeing a card we never knew, but seems like with comics especially, Greg, there's got to be like so many people getting that information out there that there's probably not a lot of things that are missed with, special issues and all that stuff, as opposed to 90s, where if it wasn't for, guys like Rodney and Joe and all these other guys that put this information out there for us, some of us would have no clue what we're looking for, know? So, I mean,
well,
it sounds like that would be tougher.
Yeah. Baseball Cardpedia, I think, is a huge thing for baseball card collectors, and the almanacs and those thick binders in card books, magazines. I think those are the ways people can differentiate for baseball cards. Football doesn't necessarily have a football Cardpedia, and basketball is the same, but it's important to share that information. And comics have had traditionally Wizard and a few other kind of guides, price guides. I know Magic and other card games in the 90s had Inquest, but there's just been, I feel like, less available information for that if you're not in the know. And it takes time to become in the know. It takes research and looking at the market and being involved in the forums, just studying cards basically, because if you just buy a pack every year, you're never going to know what you're looking at. You're just going to be blindly opening stuff and hoping for the best.
That's one thing I'm very thankful for. You're making the transition into hockey. Originally it was 90s and now Fleury is more modern, but they're so dedicated. Alan, you've mentioned that, right? Hockey collectors, out of the 4 sports, not to say anything about the others, but they're so dedicated to their players that they collect, especially. So you ask a question on like Hobby Insider, for instance, or Instagram, you'll have a response within 30 minutes, especially with 90s. There's just some really dedicated people from overseas. And so I think it wasn't a really hard transition, but the baseball stuff helped, because you know that you should be looking for different things like, oh, wait, that seems too simple, right? There should be another variation or some unreleased thing, especially when it comes to like, between the pipes or in the game stuff. There's all these other variations. So it certainly was a good way to get started.
That's going back to your original question about what's more confusing. I think 90s inserts is more confusing still, just because we have a database of information. We have the Facebook group where if you have a question, you will get it answered. I was lucky enough to find that within the first couple of months of starting. Otherwise, I would not have gotten all the huge cards that I did ahead of the rush that I did, even though it does take a year to sort of actually learn a new sector. It helps when you're surrounded by friends and people who are looking out for you and who know what they're talking about. Whereas in Magic, credit to that community, everything is pretty transparent. Like there are entire websites dedicated to like every single card that's made. There's a picture of it. There's a price. There's a chart, all free, that tells you where the price has gone, where it's been, where it's expected to go, how many reprints there are, what sets they come from, what years. I mean, it's set out like the best, Magic Wikipedia you could ever find. And so it's like, Baseball Cardpedia on steroids. Every card that's ever been released is on there, and all the information you could ever need to know about any of those cards is on there. Whereas that's still not the case for 90s inserts, because there's just all this other stuff going on that is difficult. You'd have to write a couple of pages sometimes on certain cards in order to get all the information out there for people on the backdoor releases and the variants and this and that and the other.
Yeah, that was a tricky time for cards for sure, where they had printings and unreleased printings and prizes and redemptions, exchanges. That was definitely a tricky time for cards. So without people having that knowledge or printing the knowledge or sharing the knowledge, you may never know what you're dealing with in the 90s.
Well, and that's almost like the allure of it, you know what I mean? Like with Alan, you're saying you got every card on a database. That's great, but there's so much you already know about it. I can see why the 90s still hold, with some of us, a very special place, because there's that unknown element to it in a way. You know, we don't really know what the print run is of these. Like we're 90% sure, right, of some of these rare cards, but some of those, you know, executive proofs or all this other stuff that they have back then, you don't know for sure, you know, or how many have been destroyed. Like Greg's Tim Salmon he just got not too long ago. There might be only 5 or 10 in the world still. They all could have been collected by a few people and then they threw them away and forgot it. You know, like we just won't know.
Yeah.
So whereas like a glass now out of 5, it's going to be hard to find it, but I'm pretty sure I'm going to find one, you know, within a year or two of it coming out. Whereas a card out of, you know, 100 or 25 from the 90s, you might never see it. So,
well, and you know, the 90s were kind of like the Wild West for cards because we talk about, okay, we have a print run of 100, but we have instances of executives having multiple copies of cards, or there being some insider knowledge in trading where certain cards have not necessarily seen every instance of being produced to the public, you know. So let's say, for instance, collector's choice, you know, UD choice 100 Tim Salmon prime choice reserves. Well, what if 40 of them went to executives and families? How do we know? You know, the standards were kind of just Wild West situation where it's like, just print some stuff and say there's 100 and print 100. And, you know, how do we know where the rest of them went? So they were just kind of held to different standards back then. And it was kind of like the Wild West of collecting cards.
Yeah, I don't know if they have auditors now, like Watchdog, somebody just, you know, who doesn't have a stake in it, other than the fact that you're paying them to like watch over you. So they do have a little bit of a stake, but they're supposed to be impartial and they're supposed to tell you, oh, these aren't best practices. This could leak out. You've promised people that you've only made 10 of this. You can't very well leak out the other 10 backup copies that you have in the back. But you're right. I mean, because the 90s was just kind of, it came out of the 80s. Where, you know, baseball cards were still very niche, right? 70s, like, it wasn't that huge. It started blowing up, and then all of a sudden, these companies got souped up on all this revenue and all this energy, and then they didn't have any rules. So there could be very well 2 of every single 1999 PMG out there, or more. Who knows? Like, nobody actually really knows. Every year, it seems like there's a new revelation. How many 1-of-1s? How many copies of each 1-of-1 are there, you know, that have been released? We all chase. So it is definitely deeper, more confusing, just because of the way things unfolded, like Greg said back then, compared to some of the other things. I don't know if it was quite like that.
Yeah, nobody intended for these to be $20,000 cards.
Yeah.
You know, so they were all thinking, oh, who cares if I have 2 1-of-1s? Like, these are baseball cards. These are $100 cards, $50 cards. Who cares?
Right.
So they didn't think this was going to be a, you know, I just broke the bank. I just put a solid investment. I could have bought a house, but instead I bought a Barry Bonds PMG. You know, nobody thought that way. They thought this was just like a fun thing, and they created, you know, a side backdoor copy, and nobody cares. But once the money started showing, then people were like, ooh, I've got this backdoor copy. I could just throw a serial number on it and turn it into a $50,000 card. So those situations, it was just they're like crimes of opportunity, you know, like,
right.
If it's there and you have it, why not try if that's your mindset to do so, or if you have those cards, you know, crimes of opportunity. That's what people find themselves into. Everybody's got a price, so when you have that backdoor copy, suddenly you're trying to serial number it and make it real.
All right.
But that's the thing. That year, the 90s, people were just not thinking, you know, this 1-of-1 is going to be a very expensive card. They just thought of it as a baseball card hobby. This is nothing. Who cares if it's 1-of-1 or 2-of-2? You know, they didn't think of what it is now. They didn't realize the scope of it.
You know, I heard an interesting fact, Greg, that made me think of that Tim Salmon card, for instance. there's a lot of hockey collectors, as Alan, you'll know this, those StarQuest Golds out of 100. A lot of them are over in Europe right now. And apparently what happened is a lot of those cases never sold in, Walmart's, Fred Meyer's, wherever. A lot of the retail, especially, because I think it was a retail product usually, right? So they sent it all overseas to all those collectors, and they just bought it all up back in those days. I wonder if, not just with hockey, but if a lot of the baseball and the football, the basketball ended up over there as well, because that would make it really tough. Nobody over in Europe is going to list on eBay a Tim Salmon Prime Choice Reserve. I mean, I know this is a very specific thing, but makes me kind of wonder, just how many unknown factors like that are there that we still haven't discovered,
Well, right. And we talk all the time about what do people do with their extra 90s cards, and donate them to Goodwill and send them to the hospital and give them to people less fortunate. Okay. So if that were people's mindset at any point, then if you have multiple cases of Upper Deck UD Choice 99, who's to say you're not sending that out to, people at war, or just hospitals, sick children, countries that are in poverty, and they're just opening stuff and having fun. Like, who's to say that stuff is not going out there as just extras, like just to help people out? So it's very possible those extras are just going out to places like that, and we'll never know, because they just kind of got burned up or placed in a closet in a different country. But that's very possible.
I don't know. It just makes me want to it made me appreciate them more, even back when I had all the baseball A-Rod stuff. I don't know about you, Alan and Greg, but you talk about this kind of stuff. It makes me really appreciate some of the rare ones from back in those days. Like, can't believe I have a copy,
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, go ahead.
No, I was just I was laughing at that comment of Buffalo Bills 4-time Super Bowl champs. You see that.
Prime reserves. Tim Salmon Prime reserves specifically.
Yeah. I mean, you see that they print out the shirts, and if the team doesn't win, then they send them out to the different countries.
They do. Yep. Yeah, that's funny.
Because they print those shirts for both teams, right? And whoever wins wears them.
Yeah, and then they never see the light of day if the losing team doesn't win. So they got to go somewhere. Somebody wants a T-shirt,
I just want the mega 50 card lot of Salmon Prime Choice Reserves to show up on eBay or some auction site one day and be like, I don't want these necessarily, but can you tell us the story? Where'd they come from? Because I'm sure it would be just ridiculously wild.
Yeah, that'll never happen.
Well, you did say it didn't exist, so you don't say never, Greg. You never know what could happen.
Yeah, it never gonna happen.
Yeah.
Well, what Ray was saying is true too. There are still major bonds collectors out there who have incredible bonds cards that are still yet undiscovered. I mean, we speculated how many there are, but there are some in Japan. Turns out, at least one other one who has recently begun to follow me on IG, and she's a high-end 90s collector. She doesn't just collect bonds, but she's legit. She's a she, which is rare in our industry. It's very, very rare to have a non-dude. If you look at the stats of our videos, it's like 100% dudes, 100% between 33 and 63 in terms of age. So
yeah,
but they exist. Japan, very passionate fans out there of baseball. So unsurprising. Who knows how many are in Venezuela, how many are in Mexico? Markets where there's a lot of interest in baseball.
Let's see. On Instagram, there's definitely a few women that are passionate hockey collectors too, and then there's obviously Pokemon, right? There's a real big of both sides collecting those. But yeah, hockey's been pretty cool. There's somebody I think she's in her 50s, and she collects only the Cup limited logos. And she's got full sets from certain years, and it's incredible. To put those together from 07, 06, it's just wild. knowing how long that person's been collecting. So it's nice to see some variety for sure. But a lot of passionate collectors, Alan, out there that, like you said, we're never going to know what they have, man.
Yeah. Not everybody is destined to be on social media. So those types of people, you know, they might be recluse. They might be just, they like personal connections and physical conversations, and they'll never be on social media. So as much as I would like it to happen and everybody to log their collection so we can all know what's out there, it's going to be a long time before something like that becomes the norm.
Do you guys do this still? Like when you find a really nice berry or bonds or whatever still, do you guys look for the backstory? Do you ask, or you kind of especially if it's off eBay, do you just kind of like, I'll pay for it, get it, and that's that? Because every now and then I'll get a flurry that I haven't seen since I started collecting, and I'll just ask, like, hey, where did you find this? Like, oh, I opened a box 12 years ago, had it sitting in a box. You know, I had that one recently. I'm like, wow, what made you want to just sell it all of a sudden? Like, why not last? You know what I mean? Like, I get very curious about that kind of thing, just collecting habits and patterns. Have you guys asked in the near past? Like, have you guys done that at all?
For me personally, that it depends on where I'm looking. If it's eBay, no. If it's on the forums, I feel more open to communicating on non-eBay platforms. I think eBay is set up for just pure transactions. So I've in the past, I've messaged people, and it's very either short or non-responsive on eBay. Occasionally, I'll have like a connection or two and actually make a conversation. But it seems like most people on eBay, for the most part, are geared towards transactions. So it's just, if it's on eBay, I don't really have much success in getting that communication. But every other facet of social media is more productive in my experience.
Right.
Yeah, for me, there are so many bonds cards when you're getting to the end of your want list that are like major financial decisions when you purchase them, that you need to do your diligence, right? So I do end up finding often a lot about the card that I'm buying. Like, I know where the 1999 PMG comes from. I know how the 1998 PMG came to be. That's because you're going to be launching major chips on those cards, right? You need to know if they're legit, right? You need to go find out from Rodney whether the stamp is legit, because there's all these other stuff going on. Talk to your friends, ask them what they think. Talk to other people who collect your player, find out what they know. Did they buy from the same seller? And oftentimes, as a result of doing the research that you have to do for such a major card, you do end up finding the backstory of the card. Mm-hmm. And there is something much more satisfying, I think, about knowing the backstory of a card or actually having a story. And most cards, I feel like, aren't just, oh, saw it on eBay, bought it. You know, like I would say that most cards for me have a particular story or something that I can draw from some other experience that I had in my collecting journey that I can tie to the card. It makes it more meaningful. I was talking to Matt about how, you know, before, when I was collecting baseball cards, I didn't own a single card as a kid that I didn't pull from a pack. So I didn't understand what the point was of buying a card, because you could just go to any store and buy a card at any time. What's the point in that? Like, you actually had to grind out that card in your collection by opening packs and finally getting the one you wanted. And it wasn't until much later, until I was in my 30s and 40s, where I decided buying a card actually did make sense and was made sense for the type of collector that I wanted to be.
Yeah, you'll spend thousands, millions of dollars before you actually pull a card. So you're not always destined to be the card puller. Sometimes you just have to pull the trigger on eBay and save $12,000.
You could literally buy like $500,000 worth of 98. What is the one with the golden anniversary refractor? Bowman Chrome.
Yeah, 98.
And not pull one of the 5 Barry bonds that exist in the set. Like, literally, they did the math, and you could easily spend $500,000 and not pull it. So why not just go spend whatever it is somebody is holding the card for ransom for? You know, because it's a better value.
As much as you want to be the puller, it's not always
Dude, there's next time you buy a really expensive card and you tell Greg and I think I overpaid, we'll just say, you know how much money you saved on this card? Like you saved like almost $500,000, dude.
Yeah.
Seriously.
And I don't really follow bonds that much. I don't know what's happening, but there hasn't been a lot coming out. There have been a couple of huge cards, and they've been going for nosebleed prices. So I don't know if it's the same in your sector in hockey and in modern baseball and 90s football, vintage basketball. If the heavy hitters are still selling for a ton, because it is the case for bonds still.
Yeah, I mean, the Barry Sanders, it was on PWCC. You know that PSA sold for what, 36,000, the 98 PMG for Barry Sanders.
Jeez.
How much?
It was like 38,000.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Wow.
That's wild.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of, it's weird. Marc-Andre, because he's doing all right, but you know, not in Vegas anymore. He'll have a random card go for a crazy amount, and the rest don't. So, you guys have seen those cards with the pieces of the net in it, right? That one has only come up twice from this newest release from the Winter Classic, and they both went for huge amounts, like way more than they should. But then the rest will go for cheaper, you know? So it's really unpredictable. I don't like it because, you know, you can't like set in your mind, like, I'm only going to pay this, because sometimes you have to go higher than that if you want it. So
yeah,
it's weird. It still fluctuates all over the place. The modern's like that, I guess, though, right?
Yeah. The thing with modern is traditionally, if you wait, you're going to find a better price. That's not necessarily the case with 90s or vintage, because those traditionally seem to be going up over the course of the last 8 years. But modern, that still seems to be a way of just wait and see kind of approach, where it benefits you of waiting 5 months and then making the purchase, or waiting a year for the next hot thing. And it just, you know, there's exceptions to it, where, you know, trying to pull like an Aaron Judge now might be tougher, or buying an Aaron Judge card that you should have bought back then, it might be tougher, but those are the exceptions. That's not the standard and the rule to it, because not everybody can be Aaron Judge, and not everybody is going to break records, and you're going to have some people, you know, that's kind of like the flipping and the prospect stuff. Not everybody is going to be the next star. Not everybody's going to be LeBron. So those cards are traditionally going to be less than yesterday. And that's the safe bet. It's not always the smart play, but it's the safe play.
Well, and it's tough, like you said, too. It's knowing when it's like out of 25 or less, that's where you have to kind of gauge. Because if it's out of 100 or 50 even, you're like, oh, well, that'll come back around, you know. Yeah. But Upper Deck's EPAC thing has allowed, they save like 25 to 30% of the entire print for EPAC. And so a lot of times you can wait, and then it'll hit EPAC, it'll hit ComC, it'll be cheap, and you'll be able to scoop it up, you know. But there's still been a few exceptions to that rule, and it makes it tough, you know, to know that you got it at the sweet spot. You know what I mean? So I feel like more often than not, you know, you bounce it off a few friends, say, hey, what would you pay for your guy, or where's this at? But it's, I don't know. Sometimes I buy stuff and I'm like, all right, right, Alan, like you've overpaid for stuff, but you're like, I got it. I'm happy I got it, and you have to move on because.
Well, there's for modern stuff, there's no better time than now. If 2023 comes out and people are opening it, now's the time. You're going to find it right now.
Right.
But in a year, you know, people are kind of over it, and they might list it, they might not list it. Mm-hmm. So for anything 25 or under, you might not see it for a while, but that's where the patience kicks in. And if it's not a guy who's just blowing up the world, you're going to see it for less. It's just a matter of when.
Right?
Yeah, I think that's true. You're gonna see almost any card for less because there was a period when it was clear that Bonds wasn't going to make the Hall of Fame this year through committee, and it was during the beginning of when the economy turned down. It was the end of the year. The season was over. It was looking dire for all baseball. There was nothing coming out of Bonds, but if somebody were dumb enough, I guess, to put a Bonds up for sale during that time, it didn't go for very much. So there were opportunities to jump in. But then, I had the benefit of collecting a player, which I still believe may be the most undervalued player potentially. And it's ridiculous how undervalued he is. Let's just put it that way. And his titanium metal fusion just sold for just a rough copy, just sold for $4,500 on eBay the other day. And I was speculating with another Bonds guy. I was like, that seems like a ridiculous price now. I told him I think it's a ridiculous price now, but I don't think it's legit, but in the future, that's not going to be a ridiculous price. It's just going to be standard. It's just a matter of when you want to get in. Turns out somebody actually did buy it. He bought that and like 3 other massive cards, the 1998 pink Essential Credentials card for 7,500. Just a big hitter coming in suddenly can just shake up everything and potentially set a new floor for a card like that. But you don't have to panic. There will be a time, there will be an ebb and flow in the next 10 or 15 years where you'll be able to find that card for less than $4,500 in 2023 money. So it's just like Greg said, and as you said before too, Matt, it's a matter of how much patience you have because almost every card is going to eventually come up.
Well, like when when a product comes out, Greg, you'll all see almost all 10 of the high gloss of Fleury within a given year. Within 365 days, I will kind of said that I've seen at least 5 to 7 to even 9 or 10 of all the high gloss. And so, you're right. The time is now. You got to be ready for those cards. But again, if it's out of 50 or more, you'll know it'll come back around when a box's been sitting on a shelf for 3-4 years and somebody finally cracks it. So it definitely depends. But Alan, you must feel good when you see that price on the pink, right? Knowing what you paid for it, because we reminisce about the opportunity of the card, and then you ended up getting it again, and now you've underpaid, right?
It always feels great to see that. You feel like you're smart. Oh man, I made such a great purchase. Like at the time it was a horrible purchase, but now it's great. And then you feel the opposite when you pay $700 for an Optimus Prime foil shattered glass, and 4 days later it goes for $525. But whatever, like I'm not actually counting that. It had no effect on me. No, but I mean, like, yeah, you feel it both ways. That's just part of collecting. I knew going in that this was an endorphins rush and that I was going for that. And that if I waited 5 years, I promise you I could find it for less than that sometime in the next 5 years. Way less probably. But I wanted it. I want to work on the master foil set. And I just wish this is not that collector friendly to make these boxes that expensive. It's kind of a money grab because for me, I would spend hundreds, maybe thousands anyway. But it would be nice to be able to fill out a binder, without like entering 5 figures. You know what I mean? It's just a little bit ridiculous. These cards are not worth very much. It's not like in baseball where if you hit a Mike Trout or whoever the hot new prospect is, you could be talking 5-6 figures or whatever. Like the most valuable card typically in a box that costs $200 to $300 is like $50. That's because it's for players, right? This is not, you're not prospecting. The cards are already known. Everybody knows what cards are in there. And they've been done before in most cases. Yeah. So the most expensive card is usually about $50, at most $100, which is paltry compared to like sports cards.
Yeah. You're at best you're looking at like popularity rises and spikes of art or card play. It's Pikachu's not suddenly hitting 7 home runs and you're
I'm picturing this right now, just to let you know.
You're like, man, Pikachu did awesome last night. This card,
4 bases.
Wrecked. What's another monster? Do they fight like Pew Pew or Mew Mew or whatever?
Yeah,
Mewtwo.
Mewtwo.
Yeah,
Mewtwo would strike out everybody for sure.
Right.
Okay.
There's not going to be some great news break on a Magic character. Vampiric Tutor and Mox Pearl are not going to suddenly
dropping the knowledge,
blow out. It's just what you're getting in the rare uncommons, commons, foils.
They're right on there.
Yeah,
they're right on the card. whether it's a common or an uncommon, or So it's a very weird space to be in, especially since I would just like to collect. But what's the point of buying a master set of 300 foils on eBay and then just sliding them into your binder? I feel like that's not fun.
Well,
No,
especially if you want somebody else.
Yeah, that's just the pure collector standpoint of the completionist. You're not going to have necessarily a lot of fun doing that, but you're going to be able to complete something. But the fun in as something like that, the fun is opening the packs and searching and hunting, and I don't know, that's just a different world.
I will say that I did go and look. I went down a rabbit hole and looked at all those Transformer cards. They look great, man. I mean, I grew up with the original. We all did. The original cartoon. They're boxy, and I remember the Transformers movie where Optimus and Megatron fight, and they both die, supposedly, and that was fun. It was fun to look at those. I think it would be a lot of fun to do it with somebody, but not. I don't know. I would go down a rabbit hole and then a week later be like, what did I do this for? Why did I spend this money? So Greg's a lot more patient than you and I, though, Alan. Let's be honest. Greg's like the most patient collector ever. He's like, passing that. Passing that.
Greg is patient. He is patient and wise. But once in a while, you will also just have to get the card that you want to get, regardless of whether you're supposed to or not.
Well, that boils back down to the rarity of it, If it's a 10 card printed to 10 and it pops up, you got to start thinking, when am I going to see this again? How often? Like, I don't want to wait 7 years to buy this card. So you just think, what is my absolute price that's like, okay. And you have to make that decision. But anything other than that, you're going to see again. It's just a matter of, like, if you can just think about it for a day or two, usually you can make a good decision. It's when you're sitting on the toilet with eBay and you're like, I need this now.
Yeah, for me, it's like you obsess about it for 3 days. If you can make it past the 3-day obsession, there's going to be a squirrel that runs by and you're going to be obsessed about something else, So, but within those 3 days, it's like you've never wanted something more than that. It's like that toy at the store that your mom will buy you, like you must have it today or tomorrow you're going to die. Like that feeling. Yeah, don't fall victim to that if you can.
All right. All right, Greg, I want to know, what was the last impulse buy? Like, not with you. I know a lot of your purchases are very much calculated. You're looking for a specific connection or aesthetic of the card, which is great because it's got me thinking about that. But what was the last impulse, like sitting on the toilet or, just day off at home and you're like, yep, I want that? What was it?
Yeah. I don't know. It depends on what we're saying. Is it because, like Alan was saying, I will come across a card and I'll sit on it for a week and I'll buy it. Mm-hmm. But it's something like I've not been keyed up on, So right. I had that Larry Bird autograph where it had been in my, it's too pricey. I'll never own this card. It had been in that category, and then suddenly I was entertaining it. So it's kind of on the verge of like, was that an impulse buy or not? Because I had been thinking about it, but it wasn't something that I was really entertaining. And then I did pull the trigger. So I don't know if that was an impulse buy or not, because it existed to me. So it wasn't just suddenly I have to have this. But in terms of just a pure, I didn't know this existed, now I need it. I think some like Shawn Michaels refractor, okay. Where I'm just like, oh, that looks cool. Bought it, $20, but it's in that range. It's in that range of $5 to $50. It's nothing that I was like, this $700 card I have to have right now. So there's nothing like that that's really popped up for me.
Well, and you're right, though, but look at how much more focused we are. I mean, back when we were just every Tim Salmon, every A-Rod, every Bonds, we were going for it. We knew we were battling people some of us were battling people. You had one guy you were battling, but still, you sometimes you got to just see the card and you jump on it. Boom. Don't want anybody else to see it. think now it's a lot more calculated with all of us. You know what I mean? You do spend time thinking about it. I mean, I've had Flurry cards that have been in my watch list for over 2 years, and when I have some extra money like tax return, I'll be like, all right, it's time to make an offer. This guy still hasn't sold it, and I got one for, like 70% off. So, I think it's good to have that time where you're thinking about it. So yeah, I don't know. Glass now is easy for me to make impulse buys. Like, oh yeah, $5 finally after that card's been up for click.
It's easy. Anything from $5 to $50, I feel like is easy to just say, I'll buy it, whatever. But anything over that tends to start getting your mind thinking like, do I need this? Is this something that is like cost efficient? Is this something I could find later? Most of my stuff, it sits on my watch list for days, months, years before I make the purchase. Very rarely do I find a card that I didn't know existed and I buy it immediately. Usually it's something I just sit on, and then you could say it's an impulse purchase. If you sit on a card for 10 years and then you suddenly buy it, like maybe that's an impulse purchase for me. But most of the stuff I know exists, it's low on my priority list.
There's definitely varying levels. I'm waiting for Alan to chime in and be like, yeah, I bought like 5 cards today.
No, I don't do it. It's impulse, but it's a different type. Like a major card comes up, you're like, I can't afford this. I'm not owning this card. There's no way I could justify spending the amount of money it's going to take to get this card. And then like 5 minutes before the auction ends, you put in like some ridiculous nosebleed snipe. And sometimes you win and sometimes you don't. I've done that more than I should, definitely. And I've been burned a couple of times, paid a lot more for a card than I should have, like that one gold label that I was complaining to you guys about. But typically I'm like you guys, like we know for our player collection what cards we want. I don't have a strong grasp still on all the autographs that have been released for Bonds. So there are surprises where it's just like, oh, I didn't know. I mean, it's not surprising that you wouldn't know every single one that Sterling released, right? Because there was about 400 of them released per year when they did it. So yeah, most people haven't seen it before when it comes on eBay. But short of that, I'm not surprised. And nowadays, if it's a card like a 1/1 Sterling autograph, you're not going to be able to just hit buy. You're gonna have to check your bank account first. Check your PayPal, assemble the funds, and then sweat it out for a couple of days before you even think about pulling the trigger.
Yeah. I have to say, one of the hardest things about Modern is when you see a checklist come out, and you guys know how I am, right? Like Fleury's got how many cards? And you target that one card. For instance, like the PMG that just came out. He's in a Blackhawks uniform. It's red. Like it's perfect. The photo's perfect. And so I saw the base card and I'm like even dreaming and drooling about this card more. And the first one comes up for sale. And here I am, probably going to be the first guy to buy it. I don't want to overpay, right? And so I kept going back and forth. I got a price that I was comfortable with and he was. And then you see the first one show up on eBay and it's in that range. I'm like, okay, somebody didn't put it up for like $50 or something. That would have made me feel pretty stupid. So that I think can be the biggest challenge is when there's those cards that you're like, if a Bird came out and you're like, oh, that's the perfect set design. Bird's only got 5 autos. I got to have one. And you wait and it finally shows up, but it's the first one. It can be tough to not impulsively pay more. It really is sometimes. So I fight with that all the time with the patience thing. It can be a tricky thing to do.
Yeah. Rarity always trumps patience. So it's one of those where there's a certain amount of cards that, you may not see, that, for instance, that Barry Sanders trophy collection, there's 20 of them, but it came out in 1999. So exactly. I've seen 2, and that's not a card. And to me, it's like a starting 9. I've seen 1 Tim Salmon, and I own the Tim Salmon. So sometimes you're just like, I'll pay the price and I'll deal with it, and I have it. It's done. So it's one of those just where the rarity trumps the patience. So like you were saying, 50 or more, you could probably wait. But you hit 9, 10, 20, you got to start thinking, okay, what year did this come out? How often have I seen them? Where are the rest? So if you know a bunch of those cards are in collections, you're not going to see them. If you know 10 out of 20 are in a player collection, you're not going to see those 10 of 20 come out. So
Exactly.
it's just information. You try to make the best purchase based on the information you have.
Those 90s cards, I mean, I give you guys a lot of credit for still being in that realm, because there's got to be a lot of calculation going on with price and timing and all these different things and making sure that you get it right. But I guess we both have that, right? And even Alan with Magic cards now too, you still have to gauge, what's a smart purchase and not.
Yeah, for me, like, I don't think there's any investment value in a lot. Really, the big card that I got, it was just a matter of, do I buy it now, or is it going to be twice as expensive in 5 years? The chances are almost zero, I think, that it would go up drastically, and the chances are almost 100% that they would go down. But you don't always make rational decisions as a collector. And I'm gonna like this card unless it goes to like $4. Then I'll be kind of salty about it. I'll still like the card because it'll remind me of the period that I was in right now. It's a memorable time.
Yeah.
It's the first time I've been back to collecting Magic, and I really do enjoy the art in particular of Brothers War. It's not, I didn't just pick some random thing and just be like, I'm just start buying stuff willy nilly. I'm looking at the sets that came before and the sets that came after, and it reinforces the fact that I made the right decision. This is the set, my favorite art of the last 10 releases, and it was the right decision to do it. It's just a matter of, what am I going to do with that sealed case that I'm probably going to go over to the LGS to pick up later tonight? Like, we'll see. Like, do I open it? Do I not? I guess we'll find out. The problem is that the lack of willpower means that I'm paying retail for each of these one by one, which is a lot more expensive. So if I'm going to buy 4 more of these one by one, I may as well just buy a case at a cheaper price and open 6, call it a day.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. If you have the wherewithal to know you're going to be buying those later on, then it stands to reason to just buy the case and save the money. It's different if you're making impulse purchases and you're like, I didn't know I was going to buy 6 boxes. But if you, like I said, if you have the wherewithal that's what you're going to end up doing, then it makes sense to buy the case and decide what you're going to do with those boxes at that point.
It always makes sense to, like, talk to Jeremy about this, talk to you guys about this, to sell some of your extras and stuff to fund other purchases. But that means that I'm selling doubles of Barry Bonds to be buying ultra modern, worthless Magic cards that I enjoy.
Say that. They're not worthless.
I mean, they're monetarily worthless. They're obviously not worthless to me. Otherwise, I wouldn't be spending the kind of money I've been spending on them. But nobody's going to buy them from me. Nobody wants them except me.
Yeah, it's a big unknown versus something that is stood what we could say the test of time.
Right.
Well, and I can say confident that with the 3 of us, regardless of how much time we spend, going back and forth on a purchase, or we know 100%, like the Barry for Greg and the Fleury I got in front of me, like I know I'm going for it and I have no regrets. You can't look back and say, shouldn't have. I don't think we're at that point as collectors anymore. We might have been when we first got back in the 90s, like, oh, geez, I paid double for that A-Rod. I had no clue how rare or whatever it was. So I think we don't run into that anymore. We're pretty confident in our decisions at this point, enjoying what we're buying. I mean, Greg, you think about that Tim Salmon rainbow foil. I saw how much it went for. I mean, do you feel pretty good about that purchase still?
No.
No, you don't?
No, not for modern stuff, man.
Okay.
I'm pretty adamant about just wait for modern, because I don't know that I would see it again. There's one up right now for what somebody listed it for the price that I bought.
Okay.
So that means I set the bar.
Right.
So they saw what it sold for, and they want the exact same amount.
Mm-hmm.
So to me, I just have that disdain, this sour taste in my mouth for modern cards, where it's just like, I just wait, like, why do I have to set the bar for modern? I get 90s because I've only seen one of the Prime Choice Reserve, so I get what I'm doing in there, but I don't get what I'm doing in modern. It doesn't make sense to me. But I have trouble differentiating my process I have a 90s process and I understand it because I put so much time into it, and I treat it the same as modern, but I shouldn't, because
Right.
modern has a whole different course of action to it. And
Mhm.
people are using my knowledge to my disadvantage because they just set that price for the same exact thing that I bought it for, when I could have probably just waited and um, had a conversation and turned this into a bargaining tool and got it for maybe a fraction of that. And I say that because I went hardcore on a wrestling card last year, or I don't know, 8 months ago.
Mhm.
I was like, I've got to get the first one. I need it. As soon as it comes out, I want it. There's 99 of them, and I bought it for 160. And I don't know, a month later, they were selling for 80. And so
Mm.
it's just like, why? Why? It's different with Barry Sanders and the 90s stuff because, like I said, I put the time in. I know how rare they are. I know how
Right.
often you see them or how often I don't see them. So it makes sense. But this modern stuff, you can't use the same formula.
I think for me, my love for collecting Marc-Andre Fleury can trump and get me past that. Like, I was thinking of a high gloss that I bought for $80, and most of my high gloss this Penguins ones I was getting in the 40 to 50 to 30 range, even depending on, and those are out of 10. Yeah, like I said, so it can be a little bit infuriating to be like, oh man, like here I am, I'm going to be the one to set the bar, but I think if you want it enough, because I know we collect differently, I think that is how I get past it, Greg. Where I think that rainbow foil is out of 10, right?
Mhm.
I didn't see a glass now from last year. He has one. I think it was 5 months after release. I think it was toward the end of this, and it finally showed up, and it was relatively cheap. So I think it's that unknown of how many am I going to see, especially with EPAC. Those guys get them on EPAC and they just hold them and they don't do anything with them. So they just sit there. And I know they have them. They're not selling them, and so I'm gauging all that now. So it's kind of, modern is so much more volatile, but you have to, I guess, when you're player collecting, just do it. You know what I mean? If that's what it's going to take to get that card, then within reason, I'm not $300-400 for a high gloss of McDavid. Would never do that. But for Fleury, it's still in that manageable $50-ish range. So I don't feel like I'm really screwing myself over by doing it.
Yeah.
But
Yeah,
I love the picture of Salmon, dude. I feel like it was worth it just for that, because he never gets into modern stuff anymore. So
No, he doesn't. And that's kind of like where I fall into the rut of something new, just wanting something different.
Yeah.
And I don't see a lot of 90s stuff that I need anymore. So the modern stuff kind of fills that hole for me. And I don't know. I just, modern stuff doesn't have the same punch that 90s stuff does for me personally. So when I get it and I have it, I'm like, yeah, all right. So that's kind of like a live and learn lesson where I'm thinking, okay, the next modern card that Salmon pops up, I'm probably not going to go as hard for, depending on the look and the like if it's a I like those superfractor gold vinyl stuff, so I might go hard for that. But if we're dealing with the same situation next year, I'm probably going to pull the brakes a little bit.
Well, you didn't even end up getting that, Alan. You remember that 101 Greg was going to try to grab the 101 auto from, was it Anniversary Chrome, right?
Yeah.
right.
And you didn't even, if that would have been a 90s card, you would have been way, way harder after it. I think you probably would have bought it for that price that he originally wanted. But, you were able to stay away from that card probably because of what you're talking about, right? It just didn't have the same pizzazz for you, for instance. So I mean, that's good to have limits, though. I mean, Alan, we've talked about this, Greg. Like, Alan, would you still buy Bond stuff? Like, if he had modern, would you actually do what Greg's doing and like pump the brakes, or would you be all in?
I've never been put to that test because Bonds never has had any modern stuff. His most modern cards were the year before I came back to Barry Bonds to collect. So there's literally, since I collected Bonds, there's not been like a new licensed release, literally since the day I started collecting Bonds. So that's not a decision I've had to make. I don't really know, but I do know, and I've talked to you guys about this before, how important nostalgia is to what we collect. And there's a reason why Magic calls to me in particular. I have no interest whatsoever in modern sports cards, super ultra modern sports cards. Even though I watch a lot of sports still and talk a lot of sports with my friends, it just doesn't resonate with me the same. I know that. Like even my favorite player on the Giants, even if I got a Madison Bumgarner rookie card, the best one, a superfractor maybe if it exists, I just it wouldn't do the same thing that a 1987 Will Clark Topps card did for me. It couldn't. So there's just no point in chasing it. Whereas like with hockey, that's different. That's a sport I never collected before. I'm inventing myself as I go, learning about the sport as I go, learning about every player, every roster, every line. It's fascinating to do all that at once. And with Magic, I had the foundation of having collected it when I was in 1993 and 1994. So that part, when you look at the back of a Magic card, it looks identical to the way the card looked in 1993. So it's like that lineage is there. I can actually go ahead and do that because I like how a card looks, and I've made sure, through the years there's been lots of different styles of art. I made sure it's something that I really liked. But now it's like, the collector gene in me is much bigger than the gaming gene, right? So of course I was playing with my kid, but now I'm spending a lot more of my resources trying to put together a set in my binder, less time playing. So as to your question about modern, no, I don't think I could get anything for modern. I don't think I ever will, and I don't think I'd ever need to try. It would be in the 90s. My favorite players are from there. You just look at my handle. I just finally got the Jerry Rice jersey, which completes the first 4 sports jerseys I've ever owned are, in no surprise to anybody, Montana, Young, Rice, and Bonds. So those are the only 4 that I own. It makes sense that they would be. I didn't plan it that way. It just happened to be that, and I noticed it. But yeah, there's nobody in the modern game. A Matt Cain, it's not going to be Matt Cain, Lincecum, Bumgarner to, I don't know who's left. It would never be like that, and I just couldn't do it. So it would have to be a different sport. If I moved to football, maybe, because I never collected football cards, I could collect like Justin Jefferson or somebody,
Right.
but not in baseball where I already know what I like.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Cool. Good discussions, man. I always, it's food for thought when we all talk because it makes me think, maybe rethink a purchase I'm about to make or look at my cards different. So, yeah, we're all kind of in our own realm, which is pretty cool too. We all get to kind of vicariously live through one another's purchases. Greg with his basketball, and now with your Magic stuff, Alan, it's pretty cool. So, awesome. Well, should we wrap it up?
Yeah. Yeah, I think so.
Awesome.
I think I appreciate you guys being here and talking with you about it. It's good. I feel like this episode was a good perspective on just different styles of collecting and different things. A lot of times we go down that rabbit hole of the 90s stuff, and this episode was just a little bit of everything else. So it was cool to talk to you guys about it.
I agree. Thanks to everybody who was on the feed today. I really, really enjoyed reading your comments. Thanks for humoring me and talking to me about Magic cards of all things. I'm pretty sure that's not the channel you came to for that, but thanks for hanging out and talking Magic cards with me a little bit.
Yeah.
It was awesome. It was awesome talking with you guys as always. And, I feel better about some of my purchases and I feel a little guilty about a couple of them, but that's how it goes sometimes.
Yeah.
Right. I feel like I convinced Greg to buy that salmon, but maybe next time I'll just have to buy it for myself and then just send it to you. You won't even have to think about it then. Right.
No, it wasn't, it was something like, it's a live and learn thing, that salmon, it was something fresh and new. It was a new experience for me. Salmon doesn't come up that often, and especially with modern stuff. So it was one of those, like a new experience. But I get really burned out on the plethora of the same card on modern, where it's like rainbow, black, red, blue, purple. I just get burned out on that, man. It's not for me. I'm from the simpler age where there was at best a refractor and an atomic refractor.
Yeah.
So it's different.
Well, I mean, I do have to say that, when you talked about that when this set came out, you're like, Matt, is there really this many different versions of a Stadium Club, and then the auto has versions? So yeah, it's kind of like that. But I think you got me thinking about don't go for all the like $2 to $5 variations. Like just today, I got the members only variation of the Glassnow from this year, and I believe those are a print run of 10, even though they don't have them serum. That kind of stuff is still fun. You know what I mean? Because it's relatively cheap for my player, but I've definitely swayed away from all the, unless I can get them for like 50 cents a piece, just to kind of put the rainbow together. I tend to, like Prism is insane. There's like 40 different variations. I'm like, nah, I'll stick to out of 50 or 25 and under. It can get a little old for sure. So cool. Well, thanks everybody for jumping in. Greg, Alan, great to see you guys, everybody in the chat again. And we'll catch you on the next one. Have a good weekend.
Sounds good.